Thank you so much for accepting my
Hello.
invitation. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. We've been piled in snow over here in Southwest Colorado. All the flooding that was going on in California, those storms actually came here, and so like we've been snowed in actually.
Also, they
Like
followed you.
for 3 days we couldn't leave the ranch because we couldn't get a plow out here, and it was just absolutely covered in snow. So
I
it's
find
been
it so
interesting.
amazing that you live on a ranch. I mean, it's such an incredible life that you're living. It must be quite hard, especially in winter.
Well, I have no experience with it because I'm from Southern California. So my whole life, there's just no seasons.
That's
The
quite
weather's
extreme.
perfect. I grew up by the beach. And so it's the first time that I've ever been able to like not leave the house.
Hmm.
And that was a little weird, but it's fine. We have, we're not far from town. We have plenty of supplies. We have people here to help. But it was wild, like going outside and like there's so much snow on the roof, it fell onto the fence and broke the fence. And the fence is like made of like
Wow.
solid wood. So I had to like, and the dogs were like getting over the fence because it was like a snow bridge, like in the Bering Strait. So I had to like dig all that down so that they couldn't get over. It's been really weird
Wow, that's
week.
amazing. It's reminiscent of the winters that I experienced when I grew up in Romania when we had, no, I
Oh
can't make
really?
the calculation in Fahrenheit, but it was like minus 13 on average degrees Celsius, and sometimes it go to minus 24, 25, even minus
Ah,
30 at times. It was really
wow.
crazy. And you had villages that were completely covered in snow. And you
Yeah.
had like people that had to dig basically trenches in the snow. And I remember an interview where people basically standing on, it was like a sea of snow,
Yeah.
and there was this journalist, and she was asking a man from the countryside, like, so where's the cow? Like, it's down here. My animals are down here. This is where I live.
Yeah.
Down there, it's
Yeah.
completely
Yeah. The
flat.
car, the
Yeah,
car got buried like past the windows. And so trying to dig out the car was just like, it was just so difficult. Then the shovel broke. So there was no, so we had no,
yeah.
so it's like without a shovel, you're like screwed in the
Oh man, you're
snow.
learning the hard
Because
way. I mean,
yeah, your hands would get cold. So I'm just trying to
mhm,
like, I'm like, what? So I'm using like a broom.
mhm.
Oh my god, it was awkward first winter
Yeah,
basically.
cold is good. It's good for your health. I mean, once you
I think so
master.
too. Yeah, I feel healthier, way healthier than in
Yeah,
California. I
awesome.
think it has something to do with the weather, but also working outside. So we're doing marble carving here. We're doing marble sculpture here. That's why we came to
Hmm.
Colorado because there's marble quarries in Marble, Colorado. So it's called Yule Marble. But if
Hmm.
you ever go to Washington D.C., like parts of the Lincoln Monument, a lot of the marble in Washington D.C., all those famous monuments, a lot of it is from Colorado, and so there were these fascinating marble mines that closed down, and then the Italians who run Carrara, which are the biggest, best marble quarries in the world, they bought the company and then they reopened the mines a few years ago. And so now the mines are open again. And so we have contacts there because that's if you're a marble sculptor and you want to do monumental stuff, the material is so expensive. So, for example, if we want to
Hmm.
get marble from Carrara, they got to put it in a shipping container. It's expensive, and then they ship it. Then we have to drive it. So, having access to marble in this country, um, that's really the point, and that's sort of why we came out here. Also, in Southern California, there's no properties big enough, and there's no space big enough, and there's too much. I mean, there's HOAs in the last place we lived, like homeowners associations. So it's like you can't make a certain amount of noise over a
Hmm.
certain decibel. So it just became really hard to like find a way to carve marble in the city. And so it's like, all right, what makes more sense? And we decided just to buy a ranch and move out here and just make the marble workshop our full
Oh, I really
focus.
want you to hold that thought because I want to go back to
Yeah.
this topic. You're actually the only sculptor that I've ever met and directly speaking
Oh,
to.
really?
I've never met a
Oh,
sculptor in my
cool.
life, especially not a marble sculpture, which is something, it's such a
Yeah.
rare breed. It's
They,
almost, to me,
they
I thought it was
exist, but
almost extinct because monumental art
yeah,
nowadays is mostly, I don't know, I see a lot of bronze or just,
welding.
yeah,
It's
exactly.
it's it's like it's just welded
Yeah,
stuff. And I know
exactly.
people who do this, so I don't want to like. But yeah, it's just
Yeah,
it's like a welding project that your uncle did. That's what a lot of
yeah.
monumental art is now, and they call that sculpture. So normally, if you do meet somebody and they say I'm a sculptor, they might be talking about like they're just welding stuff.
Yeah.
They're just welding stuff together. Not that that can't be artful, but in terms of actually like we're working really in the Italian method,
Mm-hmm.
and so Johanna, my wife, who's also a sculptor, she's a monument sculptor. She has a really impressive career. Like she worked on the biggest monument in India's history, state-sponsored monument for Gandhi, where it was these 40
Wow.
40 bronze figures, and she did 2 of the figures, and it was, I think she was only Westerner. It was mostly Indian sculptors. So they sculpted 40 bronze figures of Gandhi's famous Salt March, where it was this protest. I don't want to get into all the story of it, but it's just a humongous monument. So she's done like really big stuff before, but it was always cast. It was always bronze. It was always working with a foundry. So she always wanted to move into marble carving, which is, like you say, it's a pretty rare art form today. And that was also my dream. Here in California, completely didn't even know who she was. So we both kind of had the same dream. And now that we're married, we're able to do, which I think is interesting, but we're able to do this. We have the same dream. And so we're doing that together here. But we did go to Italy, actually, for our honeymoon, and we studied sculpture there. She already knew some marble carving, but we're basically doing it in the Italian tradition, mainly because it's really the only one of the only traditions left. So it's the only knowledge on hand, really. You know what I mean? But also, at least the way I'm approaching it is, it's more in line with my own understanding of the tradition of sculpture. Because even though I've only been sculpting in marble for 3 years, I've been studying it for closer to 15 years, ever since I started.
Incredible.
So before I made New Masters or anything, my goal was always I want to make like the Pietà, like Michelangelo's Pietà. I want to make that in my barn. I want to make something at that level of quality. And when I was first starting, everyone would tell me, obviously, well, we don't know how to do that anymore. Nobody can do that. Nobody can draw like the old masters. Nobody can model. Nobody can sculpt. We really can't do anything as well as they did when it comes to those crafts from these different periods throughout art history. And it's kind of like a lost art.
What do you think are the main qualities that are missing from the old masters nowadays?
Oh my God, that could be that's a big conversation.
Make a hierarchy and you put the top 3 that are for you personally, let's say, most disturbing in terms of how you respond, how your soul responds to it, like you feel the need.
Yeah, I think what the old masters did so well is they combined decorative drawing, right, designing, ornate decoration, geometry, this sort of like the principles of drawings about making marks, and they made the most beautiful marks. And they integrated that with naturalism, or with, the beauty and the appreciation of the natural world. And the way that they integrated their imagination designs, essentially their creations, but they also worked with the inspiration from nature, and not just all nature, not just like go take a picture of something and everything's nature, everything's beautiful. Not that, but selecting like Albrecht Dürer talks about selecting like a honeybee, the most beautiful parts from different flowers in order to create the honey. And it's like that. So it's a selective, interpretive collaboration with nature rooted in design. I mean, disegno, the Italian word in French is similar in a lot. I don't know what it is in Romanian, but the word for design and the word for drawing in many languages are the same.
It's very similar. Romanian is very similar to Italian. I mean, the Latin root, it's present there. And I just wanted to start because I really love how we started this dialogue, because it's not the orthodox way of starting an interview. But I didn't think about it. I didn't want to conceptualize it as an interview, just to be merely a dialogue and things to flow out spontaneously. But I know you as an incredible artist, and when I see your art, I think about Michelangelo all the time. Yeah. And I also know you as the founder of New Masters Academy, but I want to start first with your dimension as an artist. And how did you start? When was the first time you remember to have this connection with art, and where did you study actually? How did you think about sculpture?
I'll try to make it short, because I've told this story in interviews before, but it's just kind of complicated. So I'll try to give the short version. But my mother was an educator and a teacher, and she taught English. She's focused on Shakespeare, but she was somebody who really appreciated all the arts. She also drew, I actually don't know. I haven't looked at her drawings now that I'm a professional. But I thought they were very good when I was a kid. And so she could draw, and she taught my brother and I how to draw just like cartoon characters or things. Also, we didn't have a lot of money at different points throughout my life, especially after my parents got divorced. And so when she was getting her teaching credential, instead of like going to the store and buying Ninja Turtle toys or whatever, which is what we wanted to do, we would sometimes like draw figures like paper dolls, and then we would use the laminating machine at the school. So like drawing was a way for us to like entertain ourselves and also decorate. She would paint on the walls for our room. She would make a jungle, or she'd make dinosaurs, and so it was sort of a way to like make magical things that wasn't expensive, and that was more meaningful because we created them. So that's as long as I can remember. I knew that it's better to create something than to buy something because it means more and it's also more fun. But besides that, like she would take us to museums, and so we would go to the Getty, we would go to LACMA, we would go, and as a teacher, she started a travel club at a high school. She taught at high school and at college, but when she was teaching at high school, she started a travel club for the kids because she thought it was important for these kids to like see the world, and specifically to see Europe and to see the great masterpieces. And so from the age of 14, almost every year until my mid-30s, I would travel to different places, but mainly Europe. And so when I was 14, I got to see this. Yeah, I saw the Sistine Chapel, and I saw the Vatican Museum, and I saw the Louvre. And seeing those masterpieces, like seeing the Torso Belvedere and seeing the ancient, the ancient Greek sculptures and the Roman sculptures, and then of course Michelangelo and the Renaissance masters and Bernini and the Baroque masters, seeing those works like blew my mind because as a kid, there's the books you like, there's the children's book, I think it's like Beatrice Potter, for example. Like there's these books we love, the illustrations we love. There's also like, Sonic the Hedgehog and Super Mario and all this stuff that's geared towards kids. And then there's movies we like The Princess Bride or Mission Impossible. There are these movies and Disney films that we watch again and again and again. So as a child, like all the art we see, for most people, I think, me included, is entertainment that's designed for children, right? So that's sort of like our input, right? So, and when I at age of 14, when I got to see what like actual mastery looked like, it just completely blew my mind because to me, there was nothing more exciting than the Ninja Turtles, for example, like as a kid. And then just to see things that were so much, the craftsmanship was so much higher. And the magic of it, like it actually is, like animation is magic, right? Fantasia, some of my favorites, Pinocchio, that is magic. But there are levels of magic. And when you enter the Sistine Chapel and you look up at the ceiling, you really feel like you're having a transcendental experience. Yeah. And I'm not a religious person, and I had no connection whatsoever to Catholicism or the Christian mythology beyond, just being family members and stuff. But you see, when you're in the presence of real mastery, it's a transformative experience. And from that point on, even though I still love entertainment and I love a lot of the things our students love, like manga and anime and 2D animation and CG animation, and I don't really play video games anymore. But when I was a kid, obviously, I really liked it when I was an adolescent. So I still like all of those things, but to me, there's just nothing that compares to some of those masterpieces I saw. And so at that time, I was just impressed with it, and but I was still interested in film. Like I wanted to make movies and make interactive experience. I was like a typical kid going into college, but so I didn't pursue fine art. I was actually going to film school, actually. And I was writing scripts, and I wanted to write and direct my own stuff.
Oh, can I ask you, where did you grow up?
So I was born in Riverside, California, and my family on the Jacobo side, my father's side, and my mom's family all lived in Orange County. So I think they just moved to Riverside because it was cheaper. But then we ended up moving to Orange County, and so like the first few years of my life we were in a nice area. And then there was a divorce, and then my mom went back to school because she needed to provide for us, and she was doing like writing jobs, and she was illustrating and writing and getting her teaching credentials. So that whole like single parent phase, because we weren't getting support from my father, and so during that whole we were all of a sudden we were like poor basically for years, and so it kind of was like that was like a big step down in terms of having to move away from Orange County. We moved to the Inland Empire. It wasn't the best area, it was kind of like, there was crime, there was violence. All of a sudden, like as a kid, I have to like fight, or I have to like worry about, you know what I mean? Like poor folks fight.
Yeah.
And so it was sort of like, it was like a big step down. And I felt very much like, oh, I don't belong here, or, we don't deserve this. There was always this kind of thought. And so I think going to museums and stuff and doing cultural things, like we used to go to the Huntington Library a lot. When we got to do like nice things in nice places, I remember feeling like, like this is what I want. Like I don't want to have a life without beauty, or a life without safety and these things. And so I think that was sort of like a traumatic time where it really shaped me. But I was going towards film and at 20, so I was going to CSUN, California State University in Northridge, because they had a really good film program. And also my family couldn't afford USC or UCLA. And when I was there, my mom and my stepdad, who she had married a man named Stephen Kamine. He was at JPL. He worked at JPL in the machine shop. He worked on the rovers that go to Mars. He was head of the machine shop. But they and he was a wonderful man, and she was really happy. She was single for 10 years. Like a lot of her youth, she was spent just being a single mom. She didn't jump into another relationship. So it was like 10 years just me and my brother and my mom. But they got in a car accident and they passed away. So my mom and my stepdad were killed in an accident. Wow. So then, sort of like after the divorce, us having to leave Orange County and move to an area that was not great.
And how old were you at the time?
I was at that time. I had just turned 20, and my younger brother was 18. But that was like life deranging, because now I was living in LA. I had to like come back home and try to take care of the family affairs. And the actual person who hit them in the car that survived, he was fine. He tried to sue the estate, so he tried to sue my brother and I for $2 million. Turns out it didn't work. But anyway, all of a sudden, like I was in school, like trying to like focus on my future, and then everything is like deranged, and now it's like a survival situation where like it's back to being horrible, and it's like, well, how do I, how can I keep the house, or are we going to lose the house? The housing market collapsed that year, so all of a sudden the house was worth, however much it was worth, and then it was underwater, so the mortgage was more than the house.
You couldn't even breathe properly because you had the suffering multiplied without unlimited.
It was basically like it felt like the end. It was like an apocalypse. All of my dreams, all of just my entire family unit, everything, and then it was like a cascading effect where my mother passing was so traumatic for my family that other family members started dying in a connected way. So like I had an uncle who was so messed up by it, he started drinking, and then he ended up dying related to this. I had my aunt, who I was also close with, was hit by lightning. She lived in Kansas, and while she was riding her bike, and so she went into a coma like within like 2 years of this. And then I was involved in having to make the decision to unplug her. And so it was like tragedy after tragedy. But my grandmother, my girlfriends at the time, her cousin got murdered. It was just like this crazy like 2 or 3 years of just like death. And I didn't want to drop out of school, but I also couldn't live in LA because I had to try to handle the affairs back home. So I was trying to drive 3 hours to my school every day, both ways, 3 hours. And of course, there's LA traffic. And so I was falling asleep at the wheel, and I had to take a nap. The police would come and they would think that I'm on drugs. And I'm like, no, I'm just a student trying to get to school. Obviously, like it was deranging for my academic success because I couldn't even get there on time. I had all of a sudden no financial support, so I also had to start working like full time. Like I had to start actually making real money. And so before that, I was doing things like everything, like design work. I was doing like website stuff, like a lot of stuff that teenagers in my sort of like generation, the kind of stuff that they would do. But all of a sudden now I needed to like start getting paid more. So somebody helped me get connected with like a design job where I was doing design work and stuff, but I had no training or any formal stuff. And basically I would just kind of lie to get the job. They'd be like, oh, do you know how to program in C#? And I'm like, of course I do. And then I have to go and buy a book and stuff. They're like, oh, do you know how to use Illustrator? I'm like, of course I knew. So it was like very much like just trying to like survive for a while. And around a year after all that happened, I realized that even though my friends and my teachers and people that believed in me, they sort of had high expectations that I was going to go and make movies. Like everybody in the family and everyone in my community, they're like, oh yeah, Joshua's going to do this thing. And I felt that pressure, but somehow after the accident, like I feel like I got a pass. Like I can do anything I want. Like as long as I'm not like a drug addict and and homeless, I'm doing okay under these circumstances. So that sort of gave me permission to like change my major and change my focus to art, because I had found with film that although I do love storytelling, I feel like I realized I actually like the visual side of it more than the story side. And in film, they always say, show, don't tell. It's a visual medium, right? But in reality, I don't think that's really true. I think it's really a narrative medium. I think it's really closer to a novel than it is a painting. And I think that, and I was starting to find that because it's so collaborative, that my little vision of what I want is not going to be what you get. It's going to be something new. And a lot of people thrive with that collaboration. I actually didn't like it because I felt like I already knew what I wanted and everybody else was just getting in my way. And so for me, like fine art and remembering that feeling of seeing the fine art in the masterpieces in Europe, like remembering that from my teenage years and from my childhood, I'm like, why don't I just make my own stuff? It doesn't have to be a movie. It doesn't have to be a VR. It doesn't have to be a video game, right? It doesn't have to be like, that's art trying to do too much in some ways. You know what I mean? Yeah. It can be something that is simple. It can be an object. It can be a sculpture. It can be a painting. It can be a drawing. And so I sort of like that idea. And then I just changed. I just changed my major. I found that the way that art was being taught in my school, because the school was very good for film. It was one of the best for film, but for fine art, it was very much like this post-Bauhaus sort of stuff. So I took a 3D design class, and we're making chicken wire, and people are doing cocaine. like no one's taking this stuff serious. Like at school, in the classroom,
incredible.
Like no one's taking this seriously. It's a little bit like a joke. And then I'm looking at like the senior work, and like their final projects, and it's what you would expect. It's a toilet bolted to it, and like nobody. It seemed very focused on like talking the talk, marketing yourself, critically defending yourself, which felt to me very much like bullshit. It's like the art of bullshit.
Yeah.
And there was one teacher who was teaching drawing, and I got in his class, and he was actually teaching drawing. He could actually draw, but besides him, there's no drawing. Like, and I found that because I started looking at other schools, like maybe I can transfer. Every school was like this, like at least in this area. Every school was like that. I'm like, is there no university that teaches people how to draw, like traditional drawing, like how to imagine something and then create it?
That's what all my friends are telling me. Like everybody's saying, like we don't learn drawing, and it made me be so happy that I never pursued art. I've never gotten official, like formal art education. I did it from home. And
I think nobody has, because it doesn't. I mean, in Russia they do have.
The Repin Academy.
Yeah, but also for kids. So I had some of that curriculum, because we brought the Russian method to the world at New Masters Academy. We were the first to do anything online, because that's a very hard method to access. But the Russian, some countries in Asia, like in Korea and Japan, some countries do have education for kids that's way better than what I had, for example. But at the same time, it's also very limited. It's very post 20th century academic realism kind of stuff. You're not learning how to design from imagination, and you're certainly not learning anything that has anything to do with what Michelangelo and some of my heroes were doing. And so, but I did look into ateliers, right? So I went to, because I was still traveling. Like I would get a job and work for 3 months and be like, yeah, I'm totally committed to this company, and then just quit and take the few $1,000 and go to Europe for as long as until I ran out of money, and then come back, because I loved going to the museums and I loved traveling. Like, and I think I've been to like 45, 46 countries or something like that. Because I just loved, like, not just in Europe, but all over. But I love traveling.
What an amazing experience. It's incredible.
What was that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I said, what an amazing experience. It's incredible to have that. Mm-hmm.
But I got addicted to trying to find, like, what is, like, each culture, what are like the best things they ever created? What are the things they're most proud of, And so if we're in Japan, it could be like a hokusai exhibition or traditional Chinese ink painting or whatever it is. I just got really obsessed with, because every culture seems to have times in history where they were really focusing on refining the craft, whether it was a spiritual reason or if it's economic, whatever was going on. They had like the time where they really like had perfected that craft within whatever mode of expression they were using, and that just became really interesting to me. And I started to feel like the stuff that I love on the entertainment side was a bit more compromised. Like, it is entertainment, it's art. Mm-hmm. But it is entertainment, and the studio has the final say, and it has to work a certain way. But a lot of these, like, I really love Hindu art and early Buddhist art, and I love Hellenistic art, and I love that connection between the Hellenism and how that translates and becomes Buddhist art. And a lot of this stuff, like the fact that these were done, commercially, but they were done by a culture who believed that they were sort of tapping into some sort of deeper spiritual reality, whether it's Michelangelo in the Catholic Church, whether it's Bernini, but they were, their goals, or whether been literally preparing for the afterlife with their art, or maybe votive statues in antiquity, where literally these statues are imbued with magic. And the illusionary, because I mean, like, film's magic, right? Because people, it's cuts, it's not real. They're reading lines, it's not, but we leave the illusion. Well, that illusion, I think, is really powerful part of art, and I think that illusion ties into people's spirituality and really deep human connections. People, I mean, we live now right next to, I'm looking out my window, I'm looking at Mesa Verde National Park. I don't know if you ever heard of the Cliff Dwellers or the Anasazi, but there's the ancient Puebloan people who lived here. Mm-hmm. And so here on this property, there's arrowheads and metates, and there's a canyon, and there's things like, there is the evidence of these ancient peoples, even if it's as simple as them putting a handprint and blowing to create a mark that lasts thousands of years. And there's something about that, leaving a mark through time, and art being more than entertainment, that just really spoke to me personally. And ever since then, like, I decided that my path was to, and also I was just technically impressed with these master sculptures. And I'm like, I can't believe we can't do that anymore, because there's so many things that today we can do better than in the past, because of the internet and technology and science and all these things that we have at our disposal. The law of big numbers, right? There's billions of people, and if a lot of people are getting into, medieval archery, there's going to be some person who can really, like, do impressive stuff.
Definitely.
But it's not with
these
art.
Are details, basically, what the core is. I mean, this reminds me of something that I said a lot. I talked about it on Instagram, on YouTube, is I see art, I mean, one ought to pursue art for its own sake, because it's exactly like pursuing beauty for its own sake, because beauty itself has its rewards within itself. But then it's also a tool to experience to transcend the reality, because that's what we all want to have, because deep inside our souls, we want to experience immortality. And I think this is the most beautiful part about art. And I don't want to make any comments. I was so emotional, like your story. I didn't know anything about it, and it's absolutely incredible.
It's a lot.
Yeah, but this is, like, deep suffering. You can't answer to it with anything better than silence. I think silence and just silence is the best answer to it. But it's also like, it made me think that deep suffering, if you go through it the right way, it basically cleanses you of all the burdens that you might carry through life, because it's all of a sudden you're devoid of everything that was not necessary and return back to your essence, and you don't care much about the details of life. You go for what is important. And I think that's a great gain, in the deepest suffering, there is that you can take from it, because you don't see life the same way.
When you, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's okay.
No, I think that's true, because, like, when you go through deep suffering, I think that, and there had been a lot of suffering before that accident happened, because the divorce was very hard. My father was struggling with addiction and a lot of things, and he sort of, like, that was not the plan. Nobody wanted it to go that way, right? Yes. And so, and I didn't understand at the time. Nobody told me that he was a drug addict, for example. I found out much later, when he got into rehab, that he was going through that he was actually an addict from the age of like 12 or something, like addicted to pills, which makes so much more sense now. But at the time, I didn't understand. And so all of that suffering, I think you have to, like, come up with a reason to live. you know, in your own mind. You're like, well, this hurts so much. So why am I even doing this? Like, I want to make my mother proud because she worked so hard to take care of my brother and I. And like, I can't watch movies like Pursuit of Happiness with Will Smith because that's so close to my life story that's too emotional. Like, I have trouble, you know, with a lot of that stuff. But so I wanted to honor my mother, you know, because she never sold out. She didn't just jump into another relationship just to have money. She is like a person of integrity who was my hero my whole life. And because of all the trauma and stuff, I think my brother and I were very difficult boys to handle. You know, we were always like getting into trouble. And I think one time we crashed through the roof into her bedroom because we were up in the attic, and she was so upset because she's like, I can't afford to fix that hole. So it was always like we were like driving her crazy. Like we were always in trouble. We were.